Please welcome Admiral Blues Baker.
Thank you for the rose. Oh my gosh. I can't believe I get to be here today. Thank you, and I don't have any words to go beyond what I've already seen, so I'm thinking I'm in trouble. But with the sound guy Rocky and blues, I mean, it's like Rocky and Bullwinkle. You know, how can this go wrong? So I thought you should know a little bit about, first of all, being in the Navy, I graduated from the Naval Academy and became a surface warfare officer, which meant that I went to sea driving ships. But in one sense, you are all surface warfare officers. Every one of you is engaged in warfare wherever you're at, whether it's when you walk out of here to start your day or however you spend your day, and then the weekend comes and you're still engaged in warfare, and that's why we come together, because we know that we get strength by numbers and we grow. So there was this really cool Navy toast that we used to do. If you have a cup, whether it's empty or full, raise it. Hand me that paper cup, and it's just kind of cool to say, look, hoist them up high, mates. Hoist them up high. Aye? There are good ships and there are wood ships, the ships that sail the sea. But the best ships, they be friendships, and the friendships may they always be. Sail ho. And then you go out to sea. And sure enough, not too surprising, Jesus is at sea as well as land. I mean, think about it. Where was Jonah? And he said, uh-oh, big storm coming. How come you're asleep down in the hold? Well, I'm disobeying the Lord. Oh, okay, but the storm's not stopping. I know, the only way to actually stop the storm is to throw me overboard. Well, we don't want to do that, do we, guys? No, we don't. Well, it's a bad storm. Okay, we'll do it. They threw him over, the storm stopped, everything turned great. And so, always through the history of time, there have been oceans and seas, and then the engagement that we have in surface warfare. Okay, I'm just kind of like teeing this up. Wherever we're going to go today, history says that along with warfare, along with tribal migrations, there's always been music. Music is essential. So in my tribe, we have this little thing called the harmonica. Kind of came out of the traditions of Europe, Northern Europe. Think of Northern Europe. Think of even before Northern Europe and where reed instruments would have been. I read in the Psalms where there's reed instruments, and you know the migration from Israel and those areas to Northern Europe, and you get this kind of tune like. Doesn't that sound kind of like what, you know, I'm ready to hear the horn blow, and we're all going into battle, and somewhere, you know, William Wallace, well, those would be bagpipes, right? Like, hey, mates, we're going forward. And then later on, the harmonica came to America, and, you know, it had its own kind of, but then it migrated. It went from the East Coast, kind of in central, stopped for a while in a place, actually 3 places, Chicago, Memphis, and New Orleans. And something happened to the harmonica. Have you noticed? But those pioneers had those covered wagons, and they just couldn't continue over the Rockies with such a heavy metal instrument. So by the time they got to the West Coast, this thing shrunk. And actually, this is what they came up with. It doesn't work, but it looks really cool. Well, it kind of works at times. What I would say, though, you know how you always see those commercials where there's really fast cars and they're doing fun things and they sell them, but at the bottom it says professional driver only? This is one of those experiences. This is what you do if you're on a bicycle and you want to play harmonica, but you have to have a chain around your neck. You ready? Man, a sailor has found and discovered more girls because of that really cool technique, you think? I want to talk a little bit about a great Proverbs. Can everybody, I guess, is about the best. Everybody can kind of see me here. It's Proverbs 19:21. Many are the plans in a man's heart. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but the Lord's purposes prevail. It's the Lord's purposes that prevail. So I'm going to talk about both sides of that. And have you ever thought much about many are the plans in a man's heart? I mean, we are wired to plan. We're wired to build. This is just who we are. And I look back at the Bible and I'm thinking, Noah was told to build an ark, so he planned and built an ark. And then we have Moses, who built a tabernacle, and then we have Solomon, who built a temple, and Jesus himself built a church. So we're kind of wired to plan and move forward. And yet there's this weird qualification on the back of the verse. It says, but it is the Lord's purposes that prevail. So I want to talk about why does he kind of surge us into planning and then kind of pull us back a little bit and say, well, wait, it is the Lord's purposes that are going to prevail. And I think maybe it's to counter for us what's that heavy weight of assumptions that we get in our lives that are expectations, and we throw the expectations and the assumptions into our marriages, our weddings, our plans that we have, our jobs that we have, and pretty soon these expectations, these assumptions begin to weigh us down. Kind of like when you go to the airport and you think you got 50 pounds of luggage, and you put it on the scale, and it's 51 pounds, and the agent's like, okay, where's your plastic? You're going to fly, right? And it's, okay, so I got to pull the plastic out. I'm over my 50-pound weight, and that kind of reminds me of what assumptions end up doing to trying to move through life. So I want to talk about assumptions that people have about you, assumptions that you have about people, and I want to talk about assumptions of what we actually want in life. So there's kind of an arc and a trajectory in what I hope is a really short talk. And so even though I was a rear admiral, can we take that off? That's really scary. Even though there was this rear admiral thing going on, they didn't call me rear admiral. Well, I don't like being rear admiral. I was, in fact, a rear admiral lower half. Kind of sounds like a, yeah, well, you know what that sounds, rear lower. Okay, well, we'll go there. But everybody called me chaplain. It's the really nicest thing in being in the military is you just go by chaplain. So they sent me to an aircraft carrier, which is the only place I found actually more dense than a Manhattan. You've got 5,500 people living in 4.5 acres, pretty compressed. And I was assigned to the nuclear carrier Harry S. Truman. Now, some of you have heard of Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman came from the great state of Missouri. And so the crew presented me with my uniform name tag when I came aboard the Harry S. Truman. And in grand ceremony, it's this really cool, customized ship name tag. My name is engraved on this. And I'm talking about assumptions that people have about you, about me. So just a little background. Harry S. Truman, 1948 re-election campaign. He's going through Bremerton, Washington, Navy town. He's kind of doing the parade. Probably a sailor screamed out from the side saying, "Hey, Harry, give him hell!" And that "Give him hell, Harry" became what? His slogan, his motto. You know, so he carried that all the way through his election. And when the Truman was built, the motto of the ship became "Give him hell," because this is the Truman. So I get this with fanfare, my name tag, and they give it to me, and I look at it, and it says, "Give him hell, Chaplain Baker." Wait. So this is one of those big moments as a chaplain. You know, it's like their assumption about who I am could actually lower my credibility of what I'm trying to do. So it was a little weird, and they're like, yeah, there's a problem here, isn't there, chaps? Okay, well, come back tomorrow. So I did. And next day, not quite as much fanfare, but just as much fun. They gave me a name tag that said, "Give him heaven, Chaplain Baker." And I thought, that I have the most unique name tag on the entire ship. So that was a lot of fun. But think about the assumptions that have been projected on you and continue to be projected on you. And sometimes they're not really helpful, right? You got the people who are the mind readers. They know what you're thinking. They kind of push it on you. Or they're the blamers. Or, they're from the 3 tribes of the woulda, shoulda, couldas. And they're kind of putting that on you. Or they're just typically catastrophizing people. And they're always projecting catastrophizing things on you. And it kind of end up dragging you down like an anchor. So those are the assumptions that people project on us. And then there's the assumptions that we project on people. I'm going to give you a little thought experiment here. It comes from Simon Sinek and his book that says Start With Why. So assume for a minute that you know the answer to this question. I'm going to describe a person in a situation, okay? Ready? Everybody listening? All right. On a cold January day, a 43-year-old man was sworn in as the chief executive of his country. By his side stood his predecessor, a famous general who 15 years earlier had commanded his nation's armed forces in a war that resulted in the defeat of Germany. The young leader was raised in the Roman Catholic faith. He spent the next 5 years watching parades He spent the next 5 hours watching parades in his honor and stayed up celebrating until 3 o'clock in the morning. And you know who I'm describing, right? Okay, so what if I told you I left out a fact, and this is the other fact that I left out. There's a minor detail, but the date was January 30th, 1933. Does that change who that person would be for you? So I am describing Adolf Hitler here. I'm not describing John F. Kennedy. And it's Simon Sinek's way of saying, hey, we make assumptions all the time, and if you leave out just one little fact, if you omit it or you overlook it, or if I'm offering you incomplete information, it's going to affect your assumptions. It's going to affect the way you respond. It's going to affect the way you do your life. And when you're planning, it becomes a problem. So we talk about the assumptions that people project upon us. We talk about assumptions that we have about people. And then this third area, the assumptions of what we want from life. We talk a lot about that. We're planning. Some of us are looking for the next best job. Some of us are striving to maintain a healthy body. We're trying to find or keep the perfect spouse. We're trying to raise successful children. We're trying to live in a safe community. We're trying to prepare for a fruitful retirement. And many times, these are like really good things, but somehow in our lives we make them ultimate things, and therefore when good things become ultimate things, they bring us bondage instead of freedom. Amen? Can I get one amen on that? And we get tied to them emotionally, we get tied to them functionally, and we get enslaved by them. And what happens when those assumptions that we have in life, instead of keeping us buoyant, end up sinking us, and our plans are no longer inspired, but they just get despairing. So I'll illustrate it with a story. It was Jules Verne wrote a book. It was in 1870. It was called The Mysterious Island. 5 men escape this amazing escape from a Civil War camp. And they're prisoners. They get in a hot air balloon. They cut the cords. Hot air balloon rises. And they are free. And they're ready to go back to their home territory, except they don't understand that the wind is actually carrying them out to sea. And so they get over the sea. The ocean draws closer to them. They can hear these huge waves. And they realize that these passengers have too much weight in their basket, so they have no way to heat the air in the balloon. And so they take off their shoes, they take off their overcoats, they take their weapons, they throw them overboard, and sure enough, the balloon rises. Amazing, the law of physics works. And it worked for about 5 minutes, and then the balloon starts to sink again, and what they have left is what's in their pockets and the food they have, and they figured, well, better to be, high and hungry than drown on a full belly. So they throw their food over, they throw everything out of their socks, and one of them says, hey, this is working for a short time. That gets closer to the water. One of them has an idea that says, let's actually cut the ropes in this basket we're standing together. we'll cut opposite ones, we'll tie them together, we'll sit on the ropes, we'll cut away this heavy basket, and that's what they did. And they actually get the balloon high enough that they see that island, the mysterious island, and then the story goes ahead. But they live because they were able to distinguish the difference between what was really needed and what wasn't needed. And the necessities that they thought they couldn't live without became the very weights that almost cost them their life. The writer of Hebrews says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, in Hebrews 12, verse 1. So what are the assumptions that you want about life? And how are those necessities that you think you can't live without maybe the very weights dragging you down? And, there's certain weights that are going to cause us to sink. And some of them are healthier than others. I'm thinking, what are the unhealthy weights? We have this built-in need to acquire. We have this need for certainty. We have a fear of failure. We have this need for perfectionism. We've got this secret addiction that we can't share with our brothers about, and it's numbing us from reality. We have this shame and guilt in our lives that we don't know what to do with, and to think of confession to someone else is just too scary, and to think of confession to God is even more scarier. So Tim Keller down at Redeemer Church, this is a quote from him. He says, the human heart is an idol factory that takes good things, like a successful career, love, material possessions, even family, and turns those good things into ultimate things. Our hearts deify them as the center of our lives because we think they can give us significance and security, safety, and fulfillment if we attain them. A couple years ago, I went on a trip to West Timor. It's really near Bali, and I would highly recommend Bali over West Timor. But went there doing some mission work, and the people taught me how to capture monkeys. And the way to capture monkeys in West Timor is to bore a hole in the coconut, drain the milk out of the coconut, and fill some peanuts into the coconut, and just let the coconut sit there on the ground. And sure enough, do you think the monkey will be smart enough to go through that hole in the coconut, grab a fistful of peanuts, and try to pull out his hand, and guess what? His hand gets stuck. What would you do if you're a monkey? You'd let go of the peanuts, right? You think they let go of the peanuts? You think we're any different? So what's your peanuts? What's keeping you from getting out? So, assumptions, I think, are the peanuts that we have. Those expectations that we have end up being the case for keeping us trapped, the case for keeping us with what will end up being future resentments. So, and chaplains aren't immune from this, right? I mean, I'm up here just telling you, Steve Brown used to say, I'm just one beggar telling other beggars where I found bread. So I don't have the answer. I only can point us to who the guy is that does have the answer. But, I was in a situation where I was over-identified with the Navy chaplaincy. Somehow, my identity got wrapped up in the Navy chaplaincy. And then senior leadership backed me into a corner that was so difficult that there was a choice between politics and principle. And I chose to go the round of principle on that. And it's kind of, if you read the story of Joseph and how Joseph kind of went from Potiphar's house to the prison to the palace. And I had a phone call from someone over on the Senate side saying, hey, you may have thought you were Joseph in the palace. You're actually Joseph in Potiphar's house. And I got it. It helped. This person put it in context. Another brother who was able to put this in context, and I felt this emotional injury and some professional injury, and it helped me realize that I had expectations that I should not have put into what my career was. And C.S. Lewis writes in this book, The Problem of Pain, pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but he shouts in our pains. It's his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. So, anyway, I retired as a 1-star, not 2. it's kind of fun to say, hey, not all scars turn into stars. Sometimes they're there. And what did I learn from that? I learned that most of my life up to that point was lived through my words and my walk. I tried to make sure my words and my deeds, kind of were balanced. But what I got from this situation of kind of surrendering those expectations and having that personal and professional suffering was I could now live out of my words and my walk and my wounds. And I'm telling you, living out of your woundedness, it's amazing because you're not trying to prove anything to anybody. You're just who you are. It's so freeing. And oh, by the way, I serve a master who also has wounds. And I want to follow the master. So, John Bishop, I don't know if you know John, but John gave me this quote. He said, "A scar never denies the reality of the wound. It always testifies to the healing." That's amazing words, right? So, Jesus, who carries those scars, does not make bad men good. He makes dead men alive. And that's what's happening. And that's what I want to see happen here in New Canaan, because God has His Spirit right here to energize you into ways that only you have a testimony to share how that's happening. So, bad times, bad situation. My wife, she is she's beautiful and wonderful and 37 years put up with me. And, when bad things happen to her husband, the mama bear instinct comes up, right? So I'm angry, but she's really angry. And so how did it kind of plan out after the pain of that experience? Well, we prayed more than we ever prayed. It took time. It took humor. It took grace. So I knew it was over the day when Marla said, "Hey, I think I know what we're going to have engraved on our headstone, and it's going to happen to be that you didn't get your second star." I'm like, what? Why would you think about that? No, this is going to work out. So over at the Naval Academy Cemetery, we've got a headstone that she's thinking. This is what she said, engraved on there. Herein lies a one-star chaplain with his all-star wife. Let me tell you, 37 years of marriage, the only thing you can do is say, "That's awesome." That's awesome. Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. So how do we go from those peanuts that we're holding on to align to the purposes of God? I'll give you a couple ideas. I think the first point is that godly planners have a sense of commitment. And it goes back to, anybody here been to Ephesus on a trip? There's this river called the Meander, and it's very close to there. And one night, there's a story of Philip of Macedon and his son, and the armies are there. And his son is kind of, wants to be his dad, and he's in training, and he wishes to be successful, and he asks his father the question, "I have learned many things, but I still have mysteries that I do not understand. I do not know the secret of success. I do not know how to reach high goals. Please train me in this mystery." And then Philip of Macedon said, "If you walk with me, I'll take you to the river of life. I will show you. You got to get down on your knees, stare deeply at your reflection in this water." So the son bent down, and Philip of Macedon grabbed his son by the hair and just threw him underwater and stuffed his head as far deep as he could. And his son is punching and trying to gasp for breath, and he's writhing, and he's fighting with his father. And I don't know if you've ever had a place where you had to hold your breath. Somebody was holding you underwater, but it's really scary. And suddenly some inner strength bursts out of this young man, and he pushed himself out of the water, and he gulps for air, and he gets his air, and he composes himself, and he goes to Philip of Macedon, and he said, "Why did you do that?" And his father said, "When you were underwater, what was the one thing you wanted more than anything in life? To take a breath of air." He said, "Son, when you desire your goal as much as you needed that breath of air, you're going to be successful." Wow. Now, we know the name of his son. Anybody know? That's Alexander the Great. And everybody desires things, right? We wish for long-lasting relationships. We want a nice vacation. We want a great retirement. We want recognition. We want promotion. And it doesn't have to be selfish, right? We just want to be, we want to make a difference in other people's lives or in our community. We want to be a good leader. We want to be a team player. But those needs that we have are anything compared to that drowning son needing that air. So the son needed it. We generally only want stuff, and we're not committed to it. So I would say godly planners really and truly need commitment. Second thing, godly planners have to have courage. You got to have endurance and perseverance. Tough times, I think it was Robert Schuller who said tough times don't last, but tough people do. Corrie ten Boom went to her home in Haarlem, in I guess it's Holland, right? And she said, there is no panic in heaven. God has no problems, only plans. So the word here is courage. I was in the chapel in the desert with the Marines built a tent for a chapel, 4,500 Marines. We're in combat. They're flying aircraft. I have a tent called the Cami Cathedral. And I put camouflage netting over this tent, and it held about 100 Marines. And I'm preaching one day, and we have frequently Scud missiles from Iraq that would come in and blow up. And because of the risk of poison gas, we had gas masks. And so on the thigh of every Marine, and I was serving Marines, and on my thigh was this canvas bag with a gas mask inside. And the protocol is, if the Scud alarm goes off, that means that they have telemetry of an incoming Scud missile, and you put on the Scud mask, and you go to the shelter, because you do not want to be hit by a Scud missile. I'm preaching, and the Scud alarm goes off, and I stop preaching, and I'm thinking, I got to get out of here with all these Marines. I'm not the leader, though. There's a sergeant major of the Marines right there, and sergeant majors, there's God, sergeant majors, and the rest of the planet. So the sergeant major stands up, and he looks at me like we've already had a conversation. So he gives me that, I'm thinking, I have no idea where he's going with this. And he looks at his Marines, the missiles inbound, the siren's going off. He opens his canvas bag, pulls out his gas mask, puts it on, and sits down. Like nothing's going on. What do you think the Marines do? Every Marine imitates him. Well, it kind of boxed me in a corner. I mean, I don't have any idea what I was preaching on at that point, and I thought, well, I needed his leadership. So I just put my gas mask on, kind of, fumbled through what I could. The alarm went off. Patriot missiles fired, knocked the Scud out of the sky. Marines leave like there's no problem. I see the sergeant major. Sergeant major, what were you thinking? Just help me understand. And he's like, Chaplain, what safer place is there than in the center of God's will? Where else would we be that would be safe? I'm thinking, I should have been thinking of saying that, How did that happen? So the word there is just for us, not to, he had exceptional courage, but the courage enough for you to move toward the sound of the cannon. Marines always talk about move toward the sound of the cannon. I mean, the logical thing is to move away from the sound of the cannon, because the cannon's danger. But as you move toward the sound of the cannon, you're going to imitate Jesus, because I'm thinking of Jesus who said, my soul is overwhelmed to the point of sorrow. Stay here and keep watch with me. He says this in the garden. He's telling this to the disciples to say, stay here. Be courageous. And Jesus is praying, and what do those super courageous disciples do? They fall asleep, right? It's like, boom. So keep that gas mask idea in mind, and I think it might be helpful. So one lesson I learned in the Gulf was when you stay away from home for 210 days, when the idea of a shower is an idea because there's no running water. The only water that you have is water you're going to drink. When people from home are generous and kind to send you suntan lotion to put on your arms because the heat is unbearable, so you got this sticky suntan lotion, and at 4 o'clock every day the sand blows, and by 5 o'clock you look like a powdered donut, and you're still like 2 months away from a shower. It's a different lifestyle. And I'm telling you, people are ripe and ready for Jesus in those kind of situations. So take advantage of the difficulties that you have in life. But you're going to get discouraged, really discouraged. And one day I was in my little pup tent, really discouraged. And I don't know where the Marines find this stuff, but they had a whiteboard, and the whiteboard had a little, you could write on there with one of those erase markers, and they gave that to me, probably because I talked too long. I noticed I'm out of time already. And they wanted to make sure I was organized, get my thoughts organized. So I'm sitting there really sorry for myself. And the Marines, if you know anything about being a Marine, they have this word semper fidelis. You ever seen that, semper fi? Semper fi to a Marine is like, it's the moniker of who you are. It means always faithful. Semper fidelis is always faithful. So if you see a Marine, you go semper fi. Marines are always saying semper fi. And I'm in my tent, feeling sorry for myself, and I write down the word clarify. The word comes to me, clarify. Maybe I'm out here for all this time away from family. I have 2 young children, and they don't even know who I am at this point, and I write down the word clarify. Maybe I'm just to get clarity, So I go back and I think, there's more than this. I think I'm here away from all the distractions of life. There's no TV. There's nothing out here. There's absolutely no distractions, right? I mean, the only distractions we have are when the stars come out and we're going, wow, there's stars. And not even any vegetation. I write down the word purify. And I'm thinking, go back again for a minute. I'm thinking, there's more. There's still more. And I remembered these monks that would go out to the desert. They'd live in the desert. They'd intentionally go out away from everything just to not be distracted and focus on Jesus. And I said, okay, they were mortifying the flesh. That's what their words were. So I wrote, clarify, purify, mortify. And then an aircraft returned from a combat mission, and I always go down and meet them when they come in. And I was there for about an hour, and I came back to my hooch, my tent, and I walked in, and I knew a Marine had come by. But I think this Marine had more than just like the normal Marine thing. I think there was a message in this because, for me, because he took my marker and he wrote on the whiteboard, and it said, clarify, purify, mortify, semperfy. I don't know what he meant by that other than telling me as a messenger of God that God is always faithful. I'm not always faithful, but God is always faithful. I'm more like, hey, Jesus, I won't deny you. I mean, oh, yeah, actually, before the cock crows, you're going to blow it 3 times. So trust in my faithfulness, Peter. Trust in my faithfulness, Blues, because I can do what you cannot do. Because he who is able to keep us from falling and who will present us unstained before the glorious throne of heaven, he goes by the name of Jesus Christ. And he loves you. He loves you enough to share his plan for you. He loves you enough to take his wounds, because it's by his wounds we are healed, and receive that with joy and live in the light of planning, but allowing God to shape those expectations in ways that feed you, nurture you along the path of Jesus Christ. So let me offer a short prayer. Lord God, we thank you. We love you. We embrace you. Lord God, thanks for giving us these brothers to encourage us. We do not wish to take this journey alone, and we know you didn't just call one disciple. You called 12 because we need a band of brothers to be together. So encourage us this day, and we offer this prayer in your holy name. And all God's people said, amen.